One of the most hotly debated topics in the basketball community is a player's skill. From this topic, many different sub-questions have developed, like who is the most skilled player of all time? Who is the most skilled player in the league right now? And even questions like, is skill even important in the league anymore? And so many more. Many NBA fans love to compare the skills of one player to another, most of the time being a player of similar position, either from the same or different era. But is it really a fair comparison? Is it really justified to compare a player from our generation to a player from the 60s? Do players from our era have any advantages that the NBA's founding fathers didn't have? Is there really a reason that players from back then weren't doing these crazy dribble moves like Kyrie Irving? Well, in today's video, we're going to answer all these questions. We're going to find out why it seems NBA players have gotten more skilled over time. Before the video starts, be sure to like and subscribe for more great videos like these. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think it's best if we go over the history of skilled basketball players and how we ended up where we're at. It's fair to say that the first truly skilled basketball players we had in the NBA were Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell. Although Wilt Chamberlain was largely dominant with his size, he was still a very skilled player. He had an elite finishing ability with great finesse around the basket. His hand-eye coordination for a player that size was incredible. For example, his ability to time block shots, to dribble a basketball that well with his size, and his amazing footwork all showed that skill off. And the IQ of the game he had was insane for his time. His ability to predict where rebounds would land and manipulate his defenders down low is insane. Although Bill Russell was in a similar boat as Chamberlain, he mainly dominated off size and athleticism. He was still a skilled big man though. Bill Russell was one of the pioneers for projecting and envisioning where rebounds would land. He was very skilled at keeping his defender away from boards to let him dominate. Him, along with Wilt Chamberlain, also had very good coordination that helped him do things like block shots, make great passes, and allow him to get more easy baskets down low. Later in the 70s, we saw Kareem Abdul-Jabbar take all these aspects of Wilt and Russell's game and bring them up to a whole nother level. Kareem's touch on difficult shots, his incredible low post footwork, and his coordination at 7'2" was something that was never seen before. Eventually, 10-15 years ago, we saw Michael Jordan get drafted to change the league like no one else could have. Michael Jordan popularized the league to such a larger audience. He made the NBA more exciting and inspired more flashy play styles. His crazy finishes, his super smooth mid-range jumper, his insane footwork, and his one-of-a-kind dunk package all showed his innovative skills and pushed the league forward a ton. When there was a league that was just dominated by physically superior big men, MJ took everyone by surprise, showing that a guard with finesse could reign over these giants. During the 90s and the early 2000s, there were three players that influenced the skills players learned that pushed the evolution of the game forward. First off, you have Hakeem Olajuwon. His elite finishing ability, his ability to block shots so well, and his most iconic skill set, his one-of-a-kind footwork down low. At the time, it looks like he was pulling off dance moves from down low. He definitely influenced big men to have a bigger arsenal of skills and moves to have in their bag, and he showed how important footwork is on a big. The next guy we have is Allen Iverson. He really stretched the limits of what we call a carry. His flashy style of dribbling pushed the league into allowing hand placement on the side of the ball as long as the ball is still moving, while dribbling legal. Before, this dribble move had to be completed with your hands strictly on top of the ball. This made many dribble moves more difficult and even impossible to do back then. Anyways, Iverson influenced a great generation of guards that used shifty dribble moves and a knockdown jumper to dominate. And the third guy we have is Kobe Bryant. Kobe is called by many the greatest scorer of all time. On offense, he had a very similar game to Jordan, but a better three-point jumper. His 81-point game, in my opinion, was the greatest scoring performance of all time. Yes, better than Wilt's 100-piece. Anyways, Kobe is such a great overall player and influenced flashy scoring a lot. And of course, all of these former players have influenced a generation that's more skilled than any other. First, can we talk about the obvious from this generation, Steph Curry? He's the most influential player of all time in terms of just the game. His outside shooting has pioneered the next generation of players, not just small guards or just perimeters. I'm talking about everyone. Steph Curry got 7-footers pulling from 25 feet consistently. Next, can we talk about KD? We've never seen a 7-footer that can handle the ball, make jaw-dropping passes, and shoot with such efficiency than Kevin Durant. Similar to Curry, he inspired a generation of big and tall players who would have otherwise been stuck down low to play in the perimeter and show off their guard skills. Next, we have Kyrie Irving. Similar to Iverson, Irving has inspired countless players to improve their ball handling and pull off the craziest dribble moves in games. Some more slept-on players in this category are big men like Jokic and Embiid. As Kobe was known as the Michael Jordan clone, I think it's safe to say that Embiid is the Hakeem Olajuwon clone. His post moves down low, his finishing ability, his post defense, even his jump shot all resemble Hakeem so much. And Nikola Jokic, it's like he's a combination of Hakeem Olajuwon and Kevin Durant, a product of both influences. He's such a unique and special player, a primarily back to the basket big who can shoot the three, handle the ball like a guard, and pass the ball like magic. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but you get the point. Jokic, along with Kevin Durant, has inspired bigger players to show off their guard skills and use their God-given length and size. Although LeBron James definitely deserves a mention in this discussion, he hasn't really changed the game like any of these guys have. Now, the reason I'm telling you guys all of this is to give you context about the argument I'm trying to make. It's kind of dumb to compare skill levels of players from now to the past. The way that the game has evolved has made it so much easier for players to be more skilled than ever. In the 60s, you couldn't do the same type of dribble moves that the players are doing now. Back in those days of basketball, players A had to have their hand directly on top of the ball, and B, until 2009, you could only take one step with the ball after dribbling, eliminating any chances of doing these flashy moves. Like, look at the series of dribbles Kyrie does. Now, there's no way that Bob Cousy could ever get away with that. That crossover where your hand is on the side of the ball, yeah, that's getting called the other way. And look at the amount of steps these guys are getting away with in today's game. There's no way in heck that these moves are sliding in the 70s. Like, all of these Euro step spin moves, and even moves like the up and under probably would have been illegal back then. Not only did the game not allow it, but guys like Bob Cousy didn't have the same influences a guard Kyrie Irving did. Of course, when you're a kid watching basketball and the most exciting player to watch is Allen Iverson, you're going to want to perfect that crossover. But when you're growing up watching guys like Mikan, Chamberlain, Russell, and little to no dominant guards, you're not going to prioritize the same skills. Same can be said about a jump shot. If the NBA you grow up watching is dominated by strictly big men who can only score in the paint, as a guard, why would you practice shooting threes? It doesn't benefit you or your team, so why would you bother practicing unnecessary things? But on the other hand, if you grew up watching Steph Curry and the Splash Brothers win multiple championships hitting countless threes, wouldn't you want to work on that skill? I mean, clearly it's helping their team win rings. It's really beneficial to your own game, and it's what's popular in the best basketball league in the world. You have no other reason to not practice that skill. My point I'm trying to make here is people are only going to want to practice a skill if it helps their team win. They're not going to practice something that's useless in a game. We can also talk about the foul calls compared in the 60s and 70s to the 90s until present. I mean, back in the day, if you initiated any sort of contact as an offensive player, it was called an offensive foul. But from the 90s and on, the same moves were called defensive fouls. I want you guys to look at these offensive foul calls from back then. I mean, this is crazy looking at it now. Now, if you look at the foul calls from the 90s to now, like, this stuff is not sliding back then. All of this evidence just really shows how the game has evolved from a defensive-minded game to more of an offensive game. This game has become way more easy for offensively talented players. Now, I'm sure you guys can now understand how the game has become more offensively dominant, but I'm sure you're wondering, why? Why did it switch from defensive to offensive over time? The answer is actually pretty simple if you think about it. One word here: money. I mean, let's just be honest here. Would you rather see a basketball game that ends in a score of 62-68 or 115-110? It's pretty safe to say that most fans would say the latter. Well, at least casual fans. More offense and faster-paced games are more exciting for people to watch. People would rather spend their paychecks watching Steph Curry cross his defender into oblivion and hitting a 30-foot bomb than watch Tim Duncan and the San Antonio Spurs play lockdown defense for the whole game and score mainly off of layups and free throws. This is the exact reason Michael Jordan was known as the NBA's golden boy. The NBA loved the change of play style and excitement MJ brought to a more global audience. Therefore, the league promoted Michael Jordan the best that they could and decided to change up the rules and foul calls to help his game. The fans loved the excitement MJ brought to basketball, so the NBA was willing to mold the game around him because it made the league more money. And ever since MJ, the NBA has just become more flashy and exciting. It's because it's what the fans want to see. therefore making the league more money. At the end of the day, you just have to remember that the NBA is a business and that it will do whatever it needs to do to make as much money as possible. A business has to satisfy its customers somehow. With all this being said, do you see why it's really just illogical to compare the skill sets of someone like Bob Cousy to Steph Curry? It's like no Steph Curry's the more skilled player. He has all the rules assisting his game, great influences he looked up to, and on top of that, his dad was also a skilled sharpshooter. Bob Cousy didn't have any great guards to look up to, and the game was just designed for big men to dominate. He plays when size and athleticism matter more than skill, not really the best of luck for a player like him. The context of a situation matters way more than people like to think. The era you were born in has a huge effect on how your game will develop. To really conclude this video, the advancements and developments of the game and how it went from tall, physically superior bigs to skilled players of any position dominating the game. How it happened through players like Iverson, Curry, Jordan, and more. And why it happened? Because at the end of the day, the NBA is a business trying to profit off of these skilled players that bring excitement. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.